Kyle Rudolph, tight end 14 last year, 39 receptions, 48 targets, 367 yards, 6 touchdowns. Your thoughts around Kyle Rudolph?
I think Kyle Rudolph could see a similar stat line, but I think the overall talent pool of tight end is better this year, so you're going to see his finishing position decrease because of that. I know that Irv Smith Jr. is kind of the up-and-coming deal there. He was a big-time athlete at Alabama. They have big plans for him in Minnesota. Tight end typically takes a little bit longer to develop these guys, so I do think you'll see more production out of Irv Smith Jr. It wouldn't surprise me to kind of see him surpass Kyle Rudolph as their tight end one by the time the year is over. The problem is because how that Vikings offense is set up, neither one of them get out for passing much. Like you use, the 12 personnel, both guys are on both guys are on the line. They use it for their zone stretch plays. Every once in a while, you'll see one of them sneak out and drag across on like a bootleg type play. But Kyle Rudolph's, just don't expect a ton. He was actually pretty good down the stretch, guys. I mean, he had touchdowns in 3 straight games, I believe, down the stretch for the playoffs if you were pinned in by injuries. But he is not a guy that I am actively targeting in a redraft league unless I am forced to carry 2 and I made decisions, I guess, earlier on in the draft to really drag my feet on my second tight end.
I see Kyle Rudolph as that second tight end. And really what needs to be seen, I guess, is when you're going into drafting Kyle Rudolph or taking Kyle Rudolph, are you going to get 2018 Kyle Rudolph or are you going to get 2019 Kyle Rudolph? Because 2018 Kyle Rudolph was 64 catches, 634 yards, only 4 touchdowns. 2019 Kyle Rudolph, 39 catches, 367 yards, and then he did have more touchdowns. He had 6 touchdowns, but that was because he started rattling them off there towards the end of the year. It wasn't really consistent throughout the season. So, which Kirk Cousins are you going to get? Is he going to look more for Kyle Rudolph? Having Irv Smith Jr. on the field predominantly at the same time as Kyle Rudolph is going to eat into his production and eat into some of the fantasy points that he's going to gather. So, yeah, how we rank tight ends. There's that top tier, and then there's kind of that middle tier, and there's everybody else. Kyle Rudolph, to me, is firmly in that second tier. But if you're looking for a consistency base, you kind of want to kind of hope that they kind of go back to what they were doing in 2018, and I'm not exactly sure that's going to happen because Irv Smith is on the field so much with him.
Right, and when you look at Irv Smith, so interesting thing here, when you look at their stats side by side, there was a difference of 3 catches between the two of them. That was it. 1 target difference, about 50 yards difference. The only real difference that separated them out, because Irv Smith Jr. was tight end 33 versus Kyle Rudolph being tight end 14, was those 4 touchdowns. That was the massive separator there. And so even with that, I don't know that I really am going after either one of these guys when it comes to a redraft type of situation. I'd probably be looking to put either one of them as my maybe second, more likely a third tight end if I absolutely had to put a 3 tight end type of thing onto the roster just because of the league makeup, something like that. But it's not one of those guys that I'm going out to actively seek to put onto a roster just because I think both of them are going to cannibalize each other over the course of the season.
And that's just it. In 2018, Kyle Rudolph was the pass-catching tight end. In 2019, Irv Smith Jr. and Kyle Rudolph were the pass-catching tight ends. So, you look at those numbers that Kyle Rudolph had. He had 60 some odd catches. Well, then he has 40 some odd catches, and Irv Smith has nearly 40 catches. Well, that's where your production went, is those passes that were only going to Kyle Rudolph are now going to both Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr. So you're right, Derek. I think they will cannibalize each other in that sense.
The interesting thing with that is Irv Smith Jr. did that on a fraction of the snap count that Kyle Rudolph did. So through the 16 games last year, Irv Smith was only on the field for 80% or more of the snaps twice. On the flip side, Kyle Rudolph did it 12 of the 16 weeks where he was on the field for 80% or more. So, I do expect that number to kind of level out. Yes, they just paid Kyle Rudolph because they wanted him to remain a Viking after they thought he might be traded. But it is clear that when Irv Smith Jr. is on the field, Kirk Cousins does look his way more often than Kyle Rudolph. The problem last year was Rudolph just never left the field. And so Irv Smith kind of had to fight his way on there. But I think you'll see that balance out a little bit more this year. I think both of them will swap in and out. We'll see more 2 tight end sets to get them both on there. But overall, I completely agree with you guys. They will cannibalize each other as long as Kyle Rudolph is still in the purple and gold for Minnesota. And until then, they are both guys in a redraft league where, I'm going to sit tight. I think there's other options and higher floors to go around here with this tight end position this season.
I will say this too. It was probably very frustrating for Kyle Rudolph owners, especially if you were, basing everything off of the year previous where he did have such a great year. And the Vikings were more balanced this past year because they did have a healthy Dalvin Cook for 14 games. You're going to run the football a little bit more. So those are some of the things that you need to consider when you're looking at, a Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr. is they do like to run the football. They are going to run the football in Minnesota. So the ball only gets thrown, probably 30, 35 times a game is where they would be happy with it. And there's a few mouths to feed around. And, with what we've seen with Kirk Cousins, again, like I said before, he's going to throw it to the open guy. He's very smart in that way, and that he's going to throw it to the open guy. He's an accurate thrower because he makes the right decision. He's not necessarily the best quarterback, but he makes the right decisions a lot of the times.